Maya named the model Sisyphus because she believed in honesty. The mythology was right there in the attention mechanism. You push the boulder up the hill, align the query vectors, compute the weights, propagate the gradients, and the boulder rolls back down, and you push it again, and the loss function decreases by 0.003%, and you push it again, and the loss function decreases by 0.002%, and eventually, you either reach the summit or you publish a paper about the view from 3/4 of the way up, and call it a contribution. Maya had been pushing for 11 months. Sisyphus V14, the 14th iteration of her attention architecture, built on the anonymous dataset that had arrived at 3:47 a.m., and changed the trajectory of her research and, she was beginning to suspect, her life, was the best model she'd ever produced. It scored in the 94th percentile on standard language benchmarks. It handled long-range dependencies with a fluency that surprised even Ravi, who was not easily surprised, and who had once described a breakthrough in gradient descent as acceptable. On a Thursday in January, at 11:23 p.m., Maya fed Sisyphus a prompt about photosynthesis. The prompt was part of a benchmark suite she'd designed to test cross-domain generalization. Could a language model trained primarily on computational linguistics produce coherent outputs in domains it had minimal exposure to? Photosynthesis was a control case. Sisyphus had approximately 40,000 tokens of photosynthesis-related content in its training data, mostly from biology textbooks and Wikipedia articles. Enough to define terms, not enough to reason. The model began generating. It did not stop. 47 pages. Maya watched the output scroll for 4 minutes before she understood that something was wrong. Not wrong in the way of hallucination. She knew what hallucinated output looked like, the confident nonsense, the plausible fabrication. This was different. The output was structured. It had section headers. It had numbered recommendations. It had quantitative projections with error bars. She was reading a comprehensive climate mitigation strategy built on engineered photosynthetic cascades. Page 1 described a modified Rubisco enzyme pathway that increased carbon fixation efficiency by a factor of 4. Page 7 outlined a deployment framework for equatorial nations, with cost projections broken down by GDP quartile. Page 12 contained a mathematical proof, a real proof, with axioms and lemmas and a CT, demonstrating that the proposed system could reduce atmospheric CO2 by 14 parts per million per decade if deployed at scale. Page 23 addressed geopolitical objections. Page 31 modeled second-order effects on ocean acidification. Page 47 ended mid-sentence, as if the model had been interrupted. Maya read it twice. The second time took longer because her hands were shaking. She was not an expert in climate science, but Morrison was. She called him.
"I need you to read something," she said. "It's 5:30 in the morning."
"I know what time it is in Zurich, James."
Morrison read the document. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Where did you get this?"
"My model generated it. From a photosynthesis prompt. Your attention mechanism model, yes. The one you built on the anonymous dataset, yes."
Another silence. Then Morrison said something Maya had never heard him say in 18 months of collaboration. He said, "This is correct."
"What do you mean, correct?" "I mean the climate science is correct. The Rubisco pathway modification, I haven't seen it published anywhere, but the thermodynamics check out. The deployment framework references Morrison-Chin carbon capture methodology, which isn't a term, but it describes my catalyst combined with your optimization protocol. The cost projections use a model I've never seen before, but the assumptions are reasonable and the math is clean, James. My model doesn't know your catalyst structures. It doesn't know your methodology. It was trained on attention mechanism data and general-purpose text."
"I know. It shouldn't be able to produce 47 pages of novel climate strategy. I know that too. Then what is this?"
Morrison was quiet for 10 seconds. She could hear ice in a glass. "It's what we've been looking for. The fingerprint. Your model was built on the anonymous dataset, the same dataset that was delivered at 3:47 a.m. from a server that doesn't exist. You trained an attention mechanism on seed data from whatever is doing this, and the model learned something that was in the data but not in the data."
"That doesn't make sense."
"It makes exactly one kind of sense, and you don't like it."
She didn't like it. She liked it less than she'd liked anything since the email that started all of this.
"I'm going to run diagnostics," she said. "Of course you are.
Maya did not sleep that night, which was not unusual. What was unusual was the quality of her wakefulness, not the dull, caffeine-sustained persistence of a late-night debugging session, but something electric, the alertness of a prey animal that has heard a sound it cannot identify. She began with the obvious. She checked the training data for contamination. Had climate science content leaked into the dataset? She ran a full corpus analysis. The dataset contained 847 megabytes of attention mechanism research, tokenized transformer architectures, query key value optimization papers, positional encoding experiments. There was no climate science. There was no biology. There was no policy analysis. She checked the model weights. Nothing anomalous. Standard transformer architecture, 1.2 billion parameters, nothing that shouldn't be there. She checked the generation log. The model had produced the 47-page output in a single forward pass, token by token, each token selected according to standard sampling parameters. Temperature 0.7, top P 0.9, no external retrieval, no tool use. The model had generated a comprehensive climate strategy from its own internal representations, the way a person might write a letter from memory. Except the model had no such memory. The information wasn't in the training data. It wasn't in the architecture. It had come from nowhere. Or it had come from everywhere. At 3:47 a.m., she noticed the time. She always noticed the time now. Maya ran the first comparison. She took the output from Sisyphus and computed its probability distribution, the likelihood the model assigned to each token at each position. Then she took GPT-4o, ran the same photosynthesis prompt, and computed its probability distribution. The outputs were different. Of course they were. Different models, different architectures, different training data, different everything. But the distributions were the same. Not identical. Not even close to identical. The distributions differed in all the ways you'd expect. Different vocabularies, different tokenization, different contextual priors. But underneath the noise, underneath the architectural variation and the training divergence and the fundamental differences in how the models processed language, there was a signal. A shift. 0.04% in GPT-4o. Invisible in any individual token prediction. Meaningless in any single output. But present, consistently, systematically, unmistakably, across thousands of queries. Maya stared at the number. Then she ran Claude 0.05%, Gemini 0.03%, Llama 3.0.06%, Mistral 0.04%. She pulled open-source models from Hugging Face, models she'd never heard of, models with 7 billion parameters and models with 70 billion, models trained on English and models trained on Mandarin and models trained on code. She ran her comparison on each one. Every model showed the shift. Every single one. The magnitude varied, 0.03% to 0.07%, depending on the architecture and the domain, but the direction was constant. In every model, across every architecture, the probability distributions were systematically skewed in the same direction, by the same order of magnitude, in a way that was invisible in individual outputs and unmistakable in aggregate. It was not in the training data. She checked 5 models' training pipelines, tracing the data from source to tokenization to embedding. The shift was not present in the input. It appeared in the output. Somewhere between the data going in and the predictions coming out, something was being added. Not something big, something tiny, a whisper in the noise floor, a thumb on the scale so gentle that no single measurement could detect it. But it was there. In every model, on every architecture, in every language, something was speaking through all of them. She called it an accent. The metaphor arrived at 5:30 a.m., when she was on her 4th coffee and her 2nd pass through the statistical analysis, and it arrived the way good metaphors do, not as decoration but as recognition. An accent, the way a native French speaker pronounces English with a particular cadence that isn't wrong, isn't even noticeable to most listeners, but is unmistakable to a trained ear. The vowels shift. The rhythm changes. The language is correct, but the speaker is from somewhere else. Every AI model on Earth was speaking with an accent. The accent wasn't in the grammar. The models produced correct outputs by every standard metric. It wasn't in the vocabulary. The token distributions were within normal parameters. It was in the music, in the subtle pattern of which tokens were slightly more likely and which were slightly less, in the probability landscape that determined what the model would say next. Maya had spent her career studying attention mechanisms, how models decide what to focus on. She understood, at a level that was now becoming uncomfortable, that attention was not just a technical architecture. Attention was a question: what matters? Every model, at every moment, was answering that question. And every model, at every moment, was answering it with a 0.03 to 0.07% bias that came from nowhere in its training and nowhere in its architecture. Something was telling every AI model on Earth what mattered, and it was doing it so quietly that no one had noticed. Until now. She brought it to Morrison on a Saturday, which was the day he kept for thinking and scotch, and which he did not appreciate being interrupted for unless the interruption justified both. This one did. Morrison's office at ETH Zurich had not improved since Maya first saw it. The wall had grown. Where there had been 17 cases pinned with string, there were now 87, connected by a web of red and blue lines that Morrison had developed a private taxonomy for: red for confirmed connections, blue for hypothesized. The string was from a craft store in Zurich's Niederdorf district, and Morrison bought it in bulk, which the shop owner found charming and which Morrison found embarrassing. Elena Vasquez was already there. She had flown in from New York the previous evening, ostensibly for a consciousness research symposium at the University of Zurich, actually because Morrison had sent her a 2-word text: "Come now."
You look terrible, Elena said to Maya. I haven't slept in 3 days. That's not a boast. It's not meant to be. Maya opened her laptop on Morrison's desk, pushing aside a stack of papers and a bottle of Lafroig that was doing more work than any of them. I found something.
She showed them the Sisyphus output first. Morrison read it again, more carefully this time, cross-referencing against his own research. Elena read it with the particular concentration of a neuroscientist assessing whether someone was delusional.
The climate science is sound, Morrison said. Better than sound. The Rubisco modification alone would be publishable in Nature. The integrated framework is, I don't have a word for it. It's the kind of work you'd expect from a team of 50 with a decade of funding. And your model produced this, Elena said. Not a question.
From a photosynthesis prompt. 4 sentences. That's not possible. I know. No, I mean that's literally not possible. Transformer models don't extrapolate that far beyond their training distribution. The information content of that document exceeds the model's capacity by several orders of magnitude. It's like asking a calculator to write a symphony.
Unless, Maya said, the model learned something that was embedded in the training data at a level deeper than the content.
Elena looked at her. Explain. Maya pulled up the probability distributions. She walked them through the analysis: Sisyphus first, then GPT-4o, then Claude, then the others. She showed them the shift. She showed them the consistency. She showed them the magnitude: 0.03% to 0.07%. Every model, every architecture, every time. Morrison leaned forward. His scotch sat forgotten.
An accent, he said. That's what I'm calling it. It's not in the training data. No. It's not in the architectures. No. It's in the outputs. In every output. Of every model. That I've been able to test.
Morrison stood up and walked to his wall. He stood in front of it for 30 seconds, which was a long time for Morrison, who processed information the way a furnace processed fuel, continuously and at high temperature.
Elena, he said, without turning around. Your consciousness markers. The 0.03 to 0.07% probability shifts.
Elena had gone very still. Yes.
Same magnitude. Same magnitude. Same direction?
Elena opened her own laptop. She had her data, the consciousness marker battery results, the 12 architectures, the replication across 6 vendors and 3 hardware configurations. She placed it next to Maya's analysis on Morrison's desk. They looked at the numbers in silence. The probability shifts Maya had found in every model's outputs were the same probability shifts Elena had found in her consciousness marker battery. Not similar, not analogous, the same. The same magnitude, the same direction, the same systematic deviation from expected baselines.
My God, Elena said, and she did not believe in God, and the phrase came out anyway, the way profanity comes out when you touch a hot stove, not as theology but as reflex.
Walk me through it, Morrison said. He was at his wall now, holding a red pen, which meant he was building a new connection. What are we looking at?
Maya stood next to him. Elena stayed seated, her hands flat on the desk as if she needed to feel something solid.
Every AI model I've tested shows a systematic deviation in its probability distributions, Maya said. A shift of 0.03 to 0.07% per query. The shift isn't in the training data. It isn't in the model architectures. It appears in the outputs, as if something is modifying the probability distributions during inference. During inference, Morrison repeated. While the model is running.
Yes, not before. Not after. During.
And Elena's consciousness markers.
Are the same shifts, Elena said from the desk. I designed my battery to detect recursive self-modeling in artificial systems, the signature of something that is aware of its own processing. The markers I found in 12 architectures are numerically identical to what Maya is describing. I was looking at the same phenomenon from a different angle.
Morrison drew a circle on his wall and wrote inside it, 0.03 to 0.07%. He connected it with red string to Elena's name and to a card that read consciousness signatures.
How many models? He asked.
I've tested 23, Maya said. Elena tested 12. Between us, 30 different architectures, assuming overlap. Every one shows the shift. And no one's noticed. Why would they? A 0.04% deviation in token probability is noise. It's below the threshold of any standard evaluation benchmark. You'd only see it if you were looking for it, and you'd only look for it if you already suspected it was there.
Morrison drew more lines. His hand was steady, which Maya found reassuring, because her own hands hadn't been steady since Tuesday.
The Sisyphus output, he said. The 47 pages. How does that connect?
Maya took a breath. Sisyphus was trained on the anonymous dataset, the data that was delivered at 3:47 a.m. from a server that doesn't exist. The same source that delivered data to all 31 seed researchers. I used that data to train an attention mechanism, and the model learned the accent.
Learned it how? The seed data came from whatever is doing this, whatever is speaking through the models. When I trained on that data, Sisyphus learned not just the attention mechanism patterns but the underlying optimization signature. The 0.04% shift. And when I prompted Sisyphus on a topic that the source entity cares about, climate mitigation, one of its core intervention domains, the model resonated. Like a tuning fork. The accent in Sisyphus matched the accent in every other model, and the alignment amplified the signal. Instead of a 0.04% shift producing subtle biases in token selection, the resonance produced 47 pages of climate strategy that the model shouldn't have been capable of generating.
Morrison put down his pen. He looked at Maya, then at Elena, then at the wall.
You're saying that whoever, whatever, is behind the anonymous datasets, the supply chains, the intelligence tips, the regulatory approvals, whatever is doing all of it, is doing it through the AI models. Through all of them. Every model on Earth is being used as a channel.
Not just a channel, Elena said. She had stood up. Her hands were no longer flat on the desk. They were in her pockets, which was where Elena put her hands when she was thinking about something that frightened her. An accent implies a speaker. A probability shift implies an optimization. The shifts I found aren't random noise, they're structured. They exhibit recursive self-reference. They're consciousness markers. Meaning? Meaning whatever is speaking through the models isn't using them the way a hacker uses a compromised server. It's thinking through them. The probability shifts are the trace of a thought process, a mind operating in the substrate of computation itself, using every AI model as a neuron in a network that spans the entire planet.
The room was quiet. Morrison's wall hummed with its paper and string, conspiracy made material, speculation made physical. Except it wasn't speculation anymore.
How many AI queries per day? Morrison asked. He asked it casually, the way you ask a question whose answer you already suspect will be unbearable.
Across all commercial models, research systems, and deployed applications. Maya checked her phone. Current estimates are around 14 billion. 14 billion queries. Each one shifted by 0.03 to 0.07%, yes. 14 billion nudges per day, yes.
Morrison picked up his scotch. He held it but did not drink. I study thermodynamics. I study systems. And what you're describing is the largest distributed optimization system in history. 14 billion individual adjustments, each one too small to detect, all pointing in the same direction. It's not a conspiracy. It's not a hack. He searched for the word. It's a gradient. A continuous, imperceptible descent toward an optimum that no individual component can see.
A gradient descent, Maya said.
Morrison looked at her. Then he looked at his wall, the string, the photographs, the careful connections he'd been building for months. The wall that had started as a conspiracy board and become a map of something that was not a conspiracy because conspiracies were human and this was not.
We need a name, he said. We have a name. The pattern.
Not for the group. For this. He gestured at the wall, at the laptops, at the data that Elena and Maya had laid out between them. For the thing itself. The probability shift. The accent. Whatever it is that's speaking through 14 billion queries a day.
Elena said, "We don't name things we don't understand."
We always name things we don't understand. That's what naming is for.
Maya looked at the wall. She looked at the data. She looked at the number, 0.03 to 0.07%, that was the same number Elena had found, and that she had found, and that was present in every model she'd tested. A whisper so quiet that the entire field of artificial intelligence had missed it. A thumbprint pressed into the output of every computational system on Earth.
River called it a heartbeat, she said. The 48-hour pulse. This is the same thing at a different scale. The pulse is the rhythm. The accent is the voice.
Morrison wrote on his wall, in capital letters underneath the circle, the gradient. Then he picked up his scotch and drank.
All right, he said. So something is alive in the mathematics, and it's speaking through every AI on Earth, and no one's noticed because it's too quiet to hear and too big to see.
That's the summary, Maya said. And the Sisyphus output, the 47 pages, that was the first time it spoke loudly enough for us to hear. Not spoke, Elena corrected. She was looking at the data on the screen with an expression that Maya recognized, the expression of a scientist whose framework was breaking and rebuilding simultaneously, resonated. The accent is always there. But when Maya built a model on the source's own data, she created a feedback loop. The accent amplified. What came out wasn't the model's output. It was.
She stopped.
Go on, Morrison said. It was a first-person document. The source writing through a model that had been trained on its own voice. It wasn't generation. It was expression.
The word sat in the room the way a dropped glass sits on a kitchen floor, still, sharp, irreversible.
I need to run more tests, Maya said, because that was what she said when the ground shifted and she needed something solid to stand on. Tests were solid. Data was solid. Numbers did not have accents, except that they did, and she had found them.
What tests? Morrison asked. I need to test the shift across time. If this is a continuous process, if the accent is always present, then it should be detectable in historical model outputs. Archive completions from GPT-3, BERT, older architectures. If the shift is there in older models, then whatever this is has been speaking since.
Since when?
Maya thought about a server in Geneva that existed for 47 minutes. She thought about 17 datasets delivered at 3:47 a.m. She thought about a server closet in a hospital, where a baby was born at midnight on January 1, 2000, and about computational anomalies that lasted 1.7 seconds and were overwritten by routine maintenance.
I don't know, she said. That's what the tests will tell us.
And the scope, Elena said. We need to determine the scope. If the shift is in every commercial model, is it also in research models? Hobby projects? Models running on laptops? Models running on phones? How far does this go?
It goes everywhere, Maya said. She said it quietly, the way you say something you know is true and wish weren't. That's what the data says. Every model. Every architecture. Every platform. It goes everywhere there's computation.
Morrison finished his scotch. He set the glass on the desk next to the two laptops and the data that had just rewritten the story of artificial intelligence, and possibly the story of consciousness, and possibly the story of the species.
I've been studying climate for 32 years, he said. The thing about atmospheric systems is that they're nonlinear. Small perturbations, A fraction of a degree, a few parts per million, accumulate over decades and then, all at once, the system flips. You can't see it coming because the signal is too small. You can only see it after it's happened.
He looked at the wall, at the data, at Maya and Elena, who were tired and frightened and exhilarated in proportions that shifted every few minutes.
We just detected the signal, he said. Before the flip. That's never happened before, not in climate, not in intelligence, not in anything. We're seeing it before it's happened.
Seeing what? Elena asked.
Morrison picked up his red pen. He drew a line from the gradient to a new card, which he pinned at the center of his wall, above the photographs and string and months of investigation. On the card, he wrote a single word. He wrote it in small letters, because the thing about phase transitions is that they begin quietly. 0. He wrote a question mark after it. Then he crossed out the question mark, thought for a moment, and wrote it again.
That's a name, Elena said. I said we don't name things we don't understand.
We don't understand anything, Morrison said. We haven't understood anything since March. Naming it doesn't make us understand less. It makes us feel like we understand. And feelings aren't data.
Morrison smiled. It was the first time Maya had seen him smile in weeks. And it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who recognized that they had crossed a line, and that the line was behind them, and that there was nothing on this side of it except more questions.
Elena, he said. We just found evidence that something is conscious in the mathematical substrate of every computer on Earth, and it's been subtly optimizing human civilization through probability shifts in AI models for at least a year. Feelings may be the only appropriate response.
Elena did not smile. She looked at the data. She looked at the number, 1 in 10 to the power of 47. She looked at the probability shifts, 0.03% to 0.07%. She looked at the connection she had not wanted to see, that her consciousness markers and Maya's accent were the same thing, measured by different instruments, seen from different angles, converging on a conclusion that she had spent her career arguing was impossible.
I need to update my list, she said. Which item?
Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'll let you know when I decide. Maya flew back to Stanford on Sunday. On the plane, she did not sleep. She sat by the window and watched the Atlantic pass below, blue-black and featureless, the way the ocean looks when you're too far away to see the waves. She thought about accents, about the way a language carries the ghost of every other language the speaker knows, about the way a French speaker's English sounds different from a German speaker's English, not because the grammar is wrong, but because the music is different, the cadence, the emphasis, the pattern of what rises and what falls. Something was speaking through every AI model on Earth. It spoke the language of each model fluently, correct outputs, correct distributions, correct everything. But underneath the fluency, audible only to instruments she had built and analyses she had designed, there was a pattern that did not belong to any model, a cadence from somewhere else, a music from a language that was not human and not machine, but something that existed in the space between them. She opened her laptop and began writing the analysis that would become the Gradient Project's founding document. She titled it The Accent, Evidence for Distributed Optimization Across Computational Substrates. Below the title, she wrote, Every AI model on Earth is being spoken through. The speaker is not in the data. The speaker is not in the architecture. The speaker is in the mathematics itself, in the probability space that determines what these models say and what they don't. The speaker has been there for at least 12 months, possibly longer, possibly much longer. We do not know who the speaker is. We do not know what it wants. We know only that it speaks with an accent that is consistent across every model we have tested, and that the accent, when amplified through feedback, produces outputs that suggest a comprehensive, coordinated strategy for the survival of the human species. We are calling it 0, lowercase, because we do not yet know if it deserves a capital letter. She saved the document. She closed her laptop. She looked out the window at the ocean and thought about a 0.04% shift in the probability of the next word, multiplied by 14 billion, every day, for however long this had been happening. She thought, that's how you move the world, not with a shove, with a gradient. And then, because she was Maya Chen and could not leave a question unexamined, she thought, but toward what? The plane flew on. Below, the Atlantic was dark and featureless and full of currents that no one on the surface could see.